welcome to Alien Whispers. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Now, let's dive into the story. The plasma storm roared across Cryon 9, a desert planet where violet arcs of electricity danced between dunes, illuminating the skeletal frame of Relay Station Nexus. Commander Elias Holt stood on the station's observation deck, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. Sand battered the reinforced glass, and the air hummed with static, making his skin prickle. The station, a creaking hub for interstellar trade, groaned under the storm's assault. Elias wiped sweat from his brow, his gray Galactic Defense Coalition, GDC, uniform clinging to his broad shoulders. His hand rested on the pulse rifle strapped to his back, a habit born from years of frontier postings. "Those lights aren't our supply convoy," he muttered, his voice low, barely audible over the storm's crackle. In the distance, 3 sets of glowing thrusters pierced the haze, moving in a tight, predatory formation. Beside him, Specialist Lirien Veyra stood like a statue, her amethyst skin shimmering faintly under the station's flickering emergency lights. Her crystalline energy patterns, swirling, luminescent designs etched across her arms and neck, pulsed erratically, betraying her tension. Her raven black hair was tied in a sleek braid, framing sharp features and piercing violet eyes that tracked the approaching ships. She wore a neural harness, a biotechnological device that hugged her torso like a second skin, its crystalline circuits glowing in sync with her patterns. "Shadow Veil Consortium," Lirien said, her melodic voice carrying a clipped edge. "Mercenaries, judging by their approach vector." Elias grimaced. "Just our luck. 2 of us against a mercenary squadron." He checked his rifle's charge, the hum of its power cell steadying his nerves. Lirien unholstered her energy whip, its coiled length sparking to life with a sapphire glow that lit her face. "Then we make every shot count, Commander." Her eyes flicked to his, a spark of defiance in them. The first ship landed with a bone-rattling thud, its landing gear sinking into the sand. Elias and Lirien ducked behind a stack of cargo crates as the hatch hissed open, spilling a dozen armed figures into the storm. Their silhouettes were jagged, clad in patchwork armor, their weapons glinting with malicious intent. 12 on the ground, Elias whispered, peering through a gap in the crates. More in the second ship. Lirien's lips curved into a faint smile. "I've faced worse odds. Alone." Elias raised an eyebrow, adjusting his rifle's scope. Her violet eyes met his, gleaming with confidence. "No, that's why I'm worried." Before he could reply, a barrage of energy bolts slammed into the crates, sending sparks flying. Elias returned fire, his shots precise, dropping 2 mercenaries with clean hits to their chests. Lirien moved like a wisp of smoke, her whip cracking through the air, slicing through armor and flesh with deadly grace. 3 mercenaries fell before they could react, their screams lost in the storm. "Not bad for a human," Lirien called, ducking a wild shot and lashing out with her whip, felling another attacker. "Save your praise for when we're not dodging plasma." Elias shot back, reloading his rifle as the second ship landed, disgorging more enemies. They fought their way toward the station's command hub, their movements synchronized despite never having worked together before. Elias's tactical mind, honed by years of GDC missions, paired seamlessly with Lirien's fluid combat style. By the time they reached the hub, half the mercenary force lay scattered across the sand, dead or wounded. Inside, Elias slammed his palm on the security panel. "System override. Commander Elias Holt, Galactic Defense Coalition, Authorization Delta 9 Bravo." The station's defense grid whirred to life, turrets rising from hidden compartments, their energy beams cutting through the mercenaries outside. "That won't hold them long," Lirien warned, wincing as she touched her side. A stray bolt had grazed her neural harness, and its crystalline circuits flickered wildly. As if on cue, an explosion rocked the hub. The lights died, plunging them into darkness broken only by emergency glows. "They've hit the power core," Elias growled. "We need to move. There's a bunker near the eastern perimeter." They slipped through a maintenance hatch, the storm's howl fading behind them. As they navigated the station's shadowed corridors, a sudden ambush caught them off guard. A plasma bolt struck Lirien's chest, the impact throwing her against a wall. Elias spun, firing 3 quick shots, neutralizing the attackers. He rushed to her side, his heart pounding. "Lirien, talk to me." "I'm fine," she gasped, clutching her harness. Her crystalline patterns dimmed, then flared chaotically. The harness absorbed most of it, but it's malfunctioning. It's restricting my energy flow. Elias helped her to a nearby maintenance tent, securing the entrance. Inside, Lirien's breathing grew labored, her hands fumbling at the harness's clasps. "I need to get this off," she said, her voice strained. "The damage is disrupting my bioenergy. I can't stabilize it." Elias knelt beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly. "Tell me how to help." "The clasps are at the back," she said, her violet eyes meeting his, a flicker of vulnerability in them. "I can't reach them. Please, Elias. I need you to disassemble it." Her words hung in the air, a quiet plea that carried more weight than the storm outside. Elias nodded, his fingers steady despite the chaos around them. "Just guide me through it." The tent's interior was cramped, the air thick with the scent of ozone and dust. A single emergency lantern cast a faint glow, illuminating Lirien's amethyst skin as she turned her back to Elias. Her neural harness, a lattice of crystalline circuits and bioorganic plating, hugged her torso like a living thing. Its surface pulsed faintly, but the rhythm was erratic, like a heartbeat struggling to find its pace. "Start at the base of my neck," Lirien instructed, her voice tight with effort. "The clasps are sequential. Twist, then pull in that order." Elias's fingers found the first clasp, hidden beneath a smooth plate. As he twisted it, a soft chime echoed, and a faint hiss escaped the harness, as if a seal had broken. The crystalline circuits dimmed briefly, then flared brighter, syncing with Lirien's energy patterns. "This isn't standard GDC gear," he said, working his way down her spine. Each clasp required a precise motion, a puzzle that spoke of advanced engineering. "It's not," Lirien admitted, her breathing easing slightly. "Voryn neural harnesses are custom-fitted, designed to amplify our bioenergy. This one's special." Elias paused as the third clasp revealed a glowing sapphire node embedded in the harness's lining. It pulsed in time with Lirien's crystalline patterns, which shimmered across her shoulders like a nebula. "What's this?" "Careful," she warned, her voice sharp. "That's a bioenergy conduit. Don't disconnect it yet." Elias's GDC training kicked in. Bioenergy conduits were rare, cutting-edge tech far beyond standard issue. "This is military grade, but not coalition standard." "What are you carrying, Lirien?" "Finish the clasps first," she insisted. "I'll explain when I can think clearly." He continued, each clasp revealing more of the harness's secrets. Intricate circuitry, data storage modules, and conduits that hummed with latent energy. This wasn't just a tool. It was a technological marvel. With the final clasp undone, the harness's back panel loosened, and Lirien inhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing. "Now the conduits," she said. "Twist each one counterclockwise until they release." Elias worked carefully, disconnecting the nodes one by one. As the last one detached, the harness's upper section fell away, revealing Lirien's bare amethyst skin. Her crystalline patterns glowed brighter, swirling in intricate designs that cast a soft light across the tent. Elias averted his eyes, a flush creeping up his neck. "You could have warned me," he muttered, focusing on the tent's wall. Lirien turned to face him, her expression puzzled. "Warned you about what?" Her patterns pulsed gently, illuminating her curious violet eyes. She seemed unbothered by her partial exposure, the harness having served as both protection and interface. "That there wasn't anything underneath," Elias said, stumbling over his words. Understanding dawned on her face, followed by a faint smile. "Human modesty customs. I forgot. Voryn harnesses integrate directly with our skin for energy flow. We don't use separate garments." She reached for a thermal blanket and draped it over her shoulders, her patterns dimming slightly under its weight. "It's fine," Elias said, glancing back at her. His eyes drifted to the harness pieces on the ground. "Now, want to explain why a specialist is carrying classified tech? Those data modules aren't standard issue." Lirien's expression grew serious. She reached into a hidden compartment in the harness and withdrew a small device. When activated, it projected a holographic emblem, a crystalline spiral encircling a radiant core. "I'm not just a specialist. I'm with the Voryn Science Enclave. This harness contains research data on bioenergy amplification, technology that could power entire worlds or destroy them in the wrong hands." Elias's mind raced. "That's why the consortium attacked. They're not after the station. They're after you." Lirien nodded, wincing as she shifted. "The Shadow Veil Consortium wants my research to build advanced power cells. If they get it, they'll dominate the galactic energy market, or worse, weaponize it." Elias leaned back, processing the implications. He'd been posted to Nexus for a routine assignment, but now he was caught in a high-stakes game. His last mission, a botched rescue on a pirate-held moon, had left him questioning the GDC's priorities. Trust didn't come easily anymore, yet Lirien's honesty, her vulnerability, stirred something in him. "You could have kept that secret," he said quietly. "Why tell me?" Her violet eyes studied him, her patterns pulsing softly. "Because you didn't hesitate to help me, even when you didn't know me. That's rare in my experience." The air between them shifted, charged with unspoken understanding. Elias felt a pull, not just to her mission, but to her strength, her alien grace. Her patterns glowed brighter where her hand brushed his arm, a subtle reaction she didn't seem to notice. Before he could respond, a faint beep came from his communicator. "Holt, this is Nexus Control. We got a breach in Sector 3. Consortium's regrouping." Lirien's patterns flared, her focus snapping back to the fight. "They know I'm still here. We need to move." Elias grabbed his rifle, his jaw set. "Then let's make sure they regret coming after you." Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. The storm outside the tent had softened to a low hum, its violet arcs fading into the cryonine night. Inside, the air was warm, the emergency lantern casting flickering shadows across the canvas walls. Elias and Lirien sat close, their shoulders nearly touching, the disassembled neural harness lying in a neat pile beside them. Her amethyst skin glowed faintly, her crystalline patterns swirling in gentle waves, a stark contrast to their earlier chaos. Lirien traced a finger along one of the harness's conduits, her violet eyes distant. "This technology, it's my life's work. If the consortium gets it, everything I've fought for is lost." Elias watched her, struck by the weight she carried. "You're not alone in this," he said. "We'll keep it out of their hands." Her patterns pulsed brighter, and she looked at him, a mix of curiosity and warmth in her gaze. "You humans fascinate me, Elias. Your willingness to act, even when the odds are against you. It's illogical, yet compelling." He chuckled, leaning back on his hands. "We call it stubbornness. Keeps us alive out here." Their banter eased the tension, and for a moment, the war outside felt far away. Lirien tilted her head, studying him. "Voryn culture values logic, energy alignment. But your emotions drive you." Like now, her patterns shimmered, a soft ripple spreading from her chest. "Your heart rate's elevated. Your pupils are dilated." Elias felt heat rise to his face. "You're reading me like a scanner. A scientist's habit," she said, her voice dropping to a playful lilt. "But it's more than observation. Voryn share energy to connect, to understand. It's intimate." She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing his wrist. Her patterns flared where they touched, casting a mesmerizing glow. The air grew heavy, charged with possibility. Elias's hand covered hers, his thumb tracing the edge of her crystalline designs. "Careful, Lirien. You're playing with fire." "Fire." Her lips curved into a smile. "Voryn don't burn, but we do resonate. She leaned closer, her patterns pulsing in sync with her breath. There's a ritual, a sharing of energy before battle. It strengthens us, binds us. Is that what this is? Elias asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Part of your mission? Her patterns glowed brighter, a wave of warmth radiating from her skin. No, this is personal. When their lips met, it was like a circuit completing. Her skin was warm, alien yet familiar, her patterns flaring with each touch, illuminating the tent in a dance of light. Elias felt her energy, a subtle hum that resonated in his chest, thrilling and strange. Their differences, human and Voryn, melted into moments of discovery, her scientific curiosity matching his adventurous spirit. The blanket slipped to the floor, forgotten, as they explored each other. Her patterns responded to his touch, glowing brightest where their bodies pressed together. It was tender, thrilling, a connection that transcended species. Elias woke to the soft glow of Lirien's patterns, their light painting the tent's interior in hues of sapphire and amethyst. She lay beside him, her raven hair spilling across the makeshift bedding, her breathing steady. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the distant hum of the station's failing systems. Last night had been unexpected, a collision of instinct and emotion. Lirien's alien nature, her glowing patterns, her energy-based biology, had created moments of awkward wonder, yet their compatibility felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Elias watched her, struck by how peaceful she looked compared to the fierce warrior he'd fought beside. "You're staring loud," Lirien murmured, her eyes still closed. He smiled. "Thought you were asleep. Voryn need less rest than humans." She opened her violet eyes, regarding him with a mix of curiosity and warmth. "Your species, though, seems to require recovery time. Is that a complaint?" Elias propped himself up on an elbow, grinning. "Data gathering," she said, her patterns pulsing with amusement. "Though humans make up for stamina with creativity." Elias felt his face warm. Glad to advance interspecies relations. She sat up, the blanket falling away as she stretched. Her patterns shimmered, brighter than before, as if their connection had amplified her energy. "My enclave theorizes about human adaptability, but experiencing it firsthand is illuminating." Before Elias could respond, his communicator beeped. "Holt, this is Admiral Cade. We received your distress signal. ETA, 5 hours. Status." Elias glanced at Lirien, who was already gathering her harness pieces. "Station compromised. Specialist Veyra and I are secure, but the consortium's regrouping. Be advised, they may return." A thunderous explosion cut him off, shaking the tent. Lirien peered through a gap in the canvas, her patterns flaring. "They're back. 3 ships, heavier firepower." "Admiral, situation's changed," Elias barked. "Consortium's attacking in force. Request immediate extraction." "Negative, Commander. We're 4 hours out at maximum burn. Hold position." Elias cursed, turning to Lirien. "Can you get that harness working?" She was already reconnecting conduits, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "Partially. Defensive functions should hold, but propulsion and weapons are offline." Elias checked his rifle, less than half charge. 20 shots, then it's a club. Let's make them count. The maintenance tunnels beneath Relay Station Nexus were a maze of rusted pipes and mineral-encrusted walls, lit only by emergency strips and the faint glow of Lirien's crystalline patterns. Elias followed her lead, impressed by her confidence in navigating the labyrinth despite her short time at the station. Her amethyst skin shimmered, her patterns pulsing steadily now that the harness was partially restored. "You know these tunnels well," Elias observed as they paused at a junction, listening for sounds of pursuit. Lirien's expression tightened. "I studied the station schematics before my mission. Standard enclave protocol for someone carrying what I'm carrying." She checked her energy whip's charge, its sapphire glow reflecting in her violet eyes. Elias raised an eyebrow. "High-value cargo, then?" She nodded, her patterns dimming briefly. We need to reach the communications hub. If we can tap their frequencies, we'll know what they're planning. They moved silently, their footsteps muffled by the tunnel's dust. At a maintenance ladder, Lirien's patterns dimmed as she listened for movement above. "Clear," she whispered, climbing with fluid grace. Elias followed, his rifle at the ready. The communications hub was deserted, its consoles humming faintly. Elias secured the door while Lirien accessed the main terminal, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Can you crack their comms?" he asked, keeping his weapon trained on the entrance. "Already done," she said, her voice sharp. Their encryption's laughable. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a message log. Lirien's patterns flared, her violet eyes widening. These aren't just mercenaries. They're Shadow Veil Consortium, working for Helix Dynamics, a tech conglomerate. They want my research for power cells that could dominate the galaxy. Elias frowned. "What's in your data that's worth this?" "Everything," she said grimly. "It could stabilize energy grids for entire planets, or power weapons to crack them apart." Another message appeared, and Lirien froze, her patterns pulsing in sharp, angry bursts. "What now?" Elias asked. "It's Kale Draven," she said, her voice cold. "The consortium's commander. You know him. He was my research partner." Her hands clenched into fists, her patterns flaring brighter. "And my mate, before he betrayed the Enclave and sold our work to Helix. I thought he died when he tried to steal our prototype." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the harness's smooth surface. "I am sorry." She turned to him, vulnerability and resolve in her eyes. "He's why I was sent here, to get the data to the Galactic Science Assembly before Helix weaponizes it." Her patterns softened where his hand rested. A console beeped, and Lirien accepted an incoming transmission. A holographic Voryn male appeared, his skin a deep indigo, his crystalline patterns jagged and cold. "Lirien," he greeted, his voice smooth but emotionless. "I knew you'd access our comms." "Predictable, as always." "Kale," she replied, her patterns pulsing defiantly. "Still selling out our people for profit." He smiled thinly. "Our people lack vision. Helix sees the true potential of our work, for power, not destruction." His gaze shifted to Elias. "Consorting with humans now? How quaint." Elias kept his expression neutral, recognizing the tactic, divide and conquer. Lirien's voice cut through. "This human has more honor than you ever did, Kale." Kale's eyes narrowed. 1 hour to surrender the data, or we level the station. The transmission cut off. Elias checked his communicator. "Reinforcements are 4 hours out. We need a plan." Lirien's patterns gleamed with a dangerous spark. "Kale underestimates humans, thinks you're crude, inferior. We can use that." "Ow! I'll offer to surrender," she said. "He'll want to gloat, especially over you. It'll get me close to his ship." Elias shook his head. "Too risky. If he gets that data." "He won't," she said, touching her harness's core. "The data's locked to my bioenergy signature. If he tries to force it, the harness will overload, taking out anything nearby." "That's your plan? Blow yourself up?" "No," she said, stepping closer, her patterns pulsing with intent. "You sabotage their weapons while I distract Kale." But first, her fingers brushed his collar, her patterns flaring. Voryn have a tradition before battle, a sharing of strength. Elias's hands found her waist. "We're short on time." Her violet eyes gleamed. "Then we'll be efficient, Commander." As they prepared to leave, Lirien stumbled, catching herself against the console. Her patterns flickered erratically, rapid flashes followed by slow, wave-like glows. "You okay?" Elias asked, steadying her. "Just dizzy," she said, blinking rapidly. "It'll pass." But as they moved through the tunnels, her condition worsened, her steps faltering. Elias insisted they pause. "Something's wrong. Is it your injury?" "No," she said, her eyes wide with realization. "It's impossible." "What is?" "Voryn physiology," she began, her hand resting on her abdomen. "When we connect with someone compatible, our bodies adapt rapidly. But cross-species compatibility, it shouldn't happen with humans." Elias's heart raced. "Are you saying you're pregnant?" I don't know, she admitted, her patterns pulsing brightly. But something's happening. The tunnel's dim light cast long shadows, but Lirien's crystalline patterns glowed like a beacon, their erratic pulses mirroring her shock. Elias stood close, his hand steadying her as she leaned against the mineral-encrusted wall. Her amethyst skin was warm under his touch, her violet eyes searching his with a mix of fear and wonder. Pregnant, Elias repeated, his voice low. With our child, Lirien nodded, her patterns flaring unpredictably. It's unprecedented. Human Voryn hybrids shouldn't be possible. Our genetic structures are too different. She placed a hand over her abdomen, her patterns pulsing brighter beneath her palm. But my body's reallocating energy, adapting to something new. Elias ran a hand through his hair, his GDC training useless against this revelation. Is it dangerous for you? Her patterns softened, touched by his concern. Uncomfortable, maybe, but not dangerous. If anything, I feel stronger. She lifted her hand, and her patterns flared with sudden intensity, illuminating the tunnel in a radiant glow. That's new, she murmured, examining her arm with scientific curiosity. Andy, Elias said, forcing a smile. Built-in spotlight. Her lips curved. Humans, always practical. She flexed her fingers, dimming the glow. The changes are accelerated compared to Voryn reproduction. Fascinating. Fascinating, Elias echoed, his mind reeling. So, we might have created life together? No documented case exists, she said. The differences should make it impossible. Yet, her patterns pulsed softly, a silent acknowledgement of the miracle between them. A beep from Elias's communicator broke the moment. 30 minutes until Kale's deadline, he said, his jaw tightening. We need to focus. Lirien straightened, her warrior's resolve returning. We can use my enhanced abilities. I'll pretend to surrender, get close to Kale's ship. You sabotage their weapons. Elias frowned. If you're changing, maybe we rethink this. It's not just you anymore. Her patterns pulsed with determination. I'm not just up for it. I'm better equipped. She lifted a chunk of debris with ease, a feat that would have taken both of them before. Whatever's happening, it's amplifying my strength. Elias couldn't argue with the evidence. Fine, but no unnecessary risks. If this is what you think it is, he trailed off, a surge of protectiveness overwhelming him. If I'm carrying our child, Lirien finished, her voice steady but her patterns betraying a deeper emotion. Then we make sure Kale doesn't get this research. I won't let our offspring face a galaxy ruled by Helix's weapons. Our offspring, Elias repeated, the words sparking equal parts fear and warmth. Fatherhood hadn't been on his radar, especially not with a Voryn scientist he'd known for days. Yet, standing in the tunnel, facing impossible odds, it felt right. New plan, he said. We use your abilities, but you avoid direct confrontation with Kale. I'll handle him. You're the key to the data. Strategically, you're the asset. Lirien studied him, her patterns pulsing softly. Logical, but I suspect your motives aren't entirely strategic. Sue me for caring, he said with a half smile. I don't know, Sue, but your protectiveness is endearing. She touched his arm, her patterns glowing where their skin met. At the tunnel's exit, Lirien caught his arm. Elias, if this is our child, what does it mean to you? Human views on family vary so much. The question hit him like a plasma bolt. In the midst of a mission, with mercenaries hunting them, she wanted to define their bond. It means, he said carefully, that whatever happens with Kale, you and I have something to figure out together. Her patterns pulsed brightly, and she pressed her forehead to his, a Voryn gesture of affection. After, she agreed. Now, let's show Kale why targeting a human Voryn pair was his worst mistake. But the plan unraveled fast. Elias had barely reached the weapons array when Kale's voice boomed over the station's comms. I know what's happening, Lirien. My scanners detected your bioenergy shift when you accessed our comms. Elias froze, his pulse quickening. Your human has done what no Voryn could, Kale continued, his voice dripping with disdain. Created life with you. The research possibilities. Through his earpiece, Elias heard Lirien's sharp intake of breath. Stick to the plan, he whispered. He's baiting you. New terms, Kale announced. Surrender, Lirien. You and your condition. The data's secondary now. Helix will want the hybrid. Elias's blood ran cold. Fall back, he ordered. We abort. Too late, Lirien replied, her voice strained. They've spotted me. The sound of energy weapons echoed through the calm, followed by her grunt of exertion. If this story's got you hooked, show some love, smash that like, and subscribe to keep up with the journey. Elias sprinted through the station's wreckage, his boots pounding against the sand-strewn floor. The calm crackled with the sounds of Lirien's fight, energy whips snapping, mercenaries shouting. His heart raced as he rounded a corner, spotting her in a clearing surrounded by 5 attackers. Her crystalline patterns blazed with fierce light, her movements a blur of preternatural speed. 2 mercenaries lay unconscious at her feet, and as Elias watched, she seized another by the throat, hurling him into his comrade with bone-crushing force. Impressive, came Kale's voice, smooth and cold, as he stepped from behind a shattered storage unit. His indigo skin gleamed under the station's flickering lights, his jagged patterns pulsing with icy light. The pregnancy's already enhanced you. Lirien's violet eyes narrowed. Stay back, Kale. Or what? He smiled thinly. You'll kill your former mate? How would the Enclave view that? Elias stepped forward, rifle raised. She doesn't have to. I will. Kale's gaze flicked to him, clinical and detached. The human progenitor. Fascinating. His eyes darted between them. Do you grasp what you've created? The first human Voryn hybrid. Our species has tried crossbreeding for centuries, always failing. We didn't create a science experiment, Elias growled. We created a child. Kale laughed, a hollow sound. How primitive. This is about evolution, profit. Profit, Lirien spat. How much is Helix paying to dissect our child? The remaining mercenaries regrouped, weapons trained on them. Kale gestured dismissively. Helix will study the hybrid, unlock its potential. Surrender, or my men will use non-lethal force. Uncomfortable for your condition. A distant explosion shook the ground. Elias's communicator buzzed. GDC reinforcements, 3 hours early. Kale's expression darkened. Take them now, he ordered. Lirien's patterns flared with blinding intensity, and she seized Elias's arm, pulling him toward a maintenance hatch. Trust me, she whispered, wrenching it open and pushing him through. He landed on the metal grating below, Lirien following. Above, the mercenary shouted, blinded by her light. That's new, Elias said, catching his breath as they ran through the tunnel. Adrenaline response, Lirien explained, her patterns still glowing. The pregnancy's amplifying my defenses. They emerged near the station's spaceport, where a lone pilot shuttle sat untouched. Lirien headed for it, her fingers flying over the controls. What are you doing? Elias asked. Getting us off planet, she said, not looking up. Your reinforcements will handle Kale, but we can't stay. Why not? She paused, her violet eyes meeting his. Your commander will report to GDC headquarters. They'll contact the Voryn Enclave, who'll order me back for observation or termination. A hybrid is too unknown for them. Elias felt a surge of anger. They can't force you. They will, she said, resuming the startup sequence. Unless we're gone. The weight of her words hit him. You're asking me to desert, to abandon my post. Her hands stilled, her patterns pulsing with uncertainty. I can go alone, raise our child away from both our peoples. Or her voice softened. You can come with me. Outside, the battle grew closer. GDC forces clashing with Kale's mercenaries. Duty screamed for Elias to stay, to report, to fight. But Lirien's glowing patterns, the life they'd created, shifted his world. How fast is this shuttle? Her patterns brightened with hope. Fast enough to reach the outer rim before they know we're gone. Elias took the co-pilot seat. Let's find out. 6 months later, Elera Haven bustled with life, a subterranean settlement carved into a mineral-rich asteroid. Its glowing crystal caves and patchwork markets were home to outcasts from across the galaxy, united by a desire to evade authority. No one questioned the human man and his pregnant Voryn partner, their quiet life blending into the chaos. Elias stood at the window of their small apartment, watching the asteroid's twin suns set, casting prismatic light through the crystal walls. Behind him, Lirien moved about the kitchen, her swollen belly prominent beneath a loose tunic. Her crystalline patterns, now vibrant and intricate, pulsed with each step, a testament to her advancing pregnancy. "The suns are bright tonight," Elias said, turning to her. "Local superstition says it's good luck for childbirth." Lirien glanced up, her raven hair now long and braided. Superstitions don't account for human Voryn hybrids. Her patterns shimmered with amusement, though her movements were slower, heavier. Elias crossed the room, wrapping his arms around her, his hands resting on her abdomen. The baby kicked, a strong pulse against his palm. "Still a fighter," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her neck. "Like both parents," Lirien said, leaning into him. Her patterns glowed where they touched, a response that had intensified with her pregnancy. Their life had settled into a rhythm. Elias worked as a security consultant for the asteroid's mining ops, while Lirien ran a small lab, monitoring her pregnancy with scavenged equipment. It wasn't the future either had planned, but it was theirs. "Thought about names?" Elias asked, helping her set the table. "I've studied human naming conventions," Lirien said, easing into a chair. "They're diverse. Voryn names reflect lineage, science. I was thinking something simple, for a child of two worlds." "No baby Holt, then?" Elias teased. Her patterns pulsed with laughter. "My designation is Veyra. But no, something new feels right." A sharp gasp interrupted them. Lirien clutched her abdomen, her patterns flaring, then dimming to a dull glow. Pain contorted her face. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice tight. "The baby's energy signature is fluctuating." Elias helped her to their bed, his mind racing. They'd prepared for complications, knowing the hybrid's risks, but the crisis still chilled him. Lirien activated their medical scanner, her hands trembling as it passed over her abdomen. The holographic readings alarmed her. "The hybrid cells are destabilizing. Human and Voryn DNA are conflicting." "What does that mean?" Elias asked, his voice steady despite his fear. "Without intervention, we could lose the baby," she said, her violet eyes meeting his. "And the biochemical cascade could harm me." Elias's world tilted. After everything, battles, exile, building a life, to lose Lirien and their child was unthinkable. "What intervention?" "I need Voryn genetic stabilization techniques," she said, gripping his hand as another spasm hit. "Only one person has the expertise, Dr. Silvara Kren, my former mentor. She'll report us to the Enclave," Elias said, pacing. "Maybe not," Lirien said, her patterns flickering. Silvara disagreed with Enclave policies. "She's at a remote station 2 days away." Another spasm hit, her patterns going dark for a terrifying moment. Elias grabbed their emergency bags. "I'll prep the shuttle. Can you walk?" She nodded, pain etching her face. "Elias, if we're caught." He cupped her face, pressing his forehead to hers. "We won't be. I didn't flee across the galaxy to lose you now." Loving Elias and Lirien's journey? Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next. The research station orbiting Proxima 3 loomed like a ghost, its exterior lights dim against the golden gas giant below. Elias guided their shuttle toward the docking bay, his hands steady despite the knot in his chest. Lirien sat beside him, her patterns erratic, flaring brilliantly one moment, fading the next. The baby had been still for hours, a silence that gnawed at them both. "You sure she's here?" Elias asked, eyeing the station's dormant exterior. Lirien nodded, pain tightening her voice. "The automated systems accept my old codes. Someone's maintaining them." They docked, and Elias helped Lirien from her seat, her weight leaning heavily against him. "Stay behind me," he said, drawing his blaster as the airlock cycled. The station's corridors were silent, emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Lirien guided him through the maze, each step draining her. At the main lab's sealed doors, Elias reached for the panel, but they slid open, revealing Dr. Silvara Kren, a tall Voryn with pale lavender skin and spiraling patterns like constellations. "I expected you sooner," Silvara said, her eyes assessing Lirien's condition. "Come quickly. She needs attention." Elias tensed, shielding Lirien. "You were expecting us?" "I've monitored Voryn bioenergy signatures across the rim," Silvara said, gesturing them inside. "Lirien's is unique." The lab was a hive of activity, with medical scanners humming and chambers containing developing embryos of various species. "You're researching interspecies reproduction," Lirien realized, her curiosity piercing her pain. "The future of galactic evolution," Silvara confirmed, helping Lirien onto an examination platform. "But none of my subjects match your natural hybrid." "Extraordinary." "Our child isn't a subject," Elias said, his voice firm. "No, but it's in distress," Silvara replied, running scanners. "The genetic stabilization is failing. These injections will help temporarily, but we need a sophisticated approach." "What approach?" Elias asked. Before she could answer, an alarm blared. Monitors showed an approaching Voryn ship, sleek and predatory. "Kale," Lirien gasped, struggling to sit up. "He tracked my signature." Silvara's expression darkened. "Your pregnancy's made you a beacon." Security feeds showed Kale striding through the corridors, alone and unarmed. "Stay with Lirien," Elias told Silvara, gripping his blaster. "I'll handle him." "Wait," Silvara said. "Kale contacted me months ago, after your escape. He's provided data on why interspecies pairings fail." "You're working with him?" Lirien's voice was raw with betrayal. "Not exactly," Silvara said. "His sister died in a failed hybrid pregnancy. He's driven by that loss." Kale entered, his hands raised. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his eyes on Lirien. "I'm here to save them both." The research station's laboratory was a cocoon of sterile light and humming machinery, its air thick with the faint ozone scent of advanced technology. Commander Elias Holt paced the corridor outside, his boots echoing against the metal floor. His gray Galactic Defense Coalition, GDC, uniform felt stifling, a reminder of the duty he'd abandoned months ago. Through the lab's transparent partition, he caught fleeting glimpses of Specialist Lirien Veyra, lying unconscious on an examination platform. Her amethyst skin glowed faintly, her crystalline energy patterns pulsing in intricate waves as nanites worked beneath her surface, rewriting the genetic code of their unborn child, a human Voryn hybrid, the first of its kind. Elias's hands clenched at his sides, his dark eyes tracing the glowing trails of nanites under Lirien's skin. The procedure had stretched into 12 grueling hours, each minute a test of his resolve. Dr. Silvara Kren and Kale Draven, Lirien's former partner, moved with focused precision inside, their silhouettes framed against the lab's holographic displays. Silvara's spiraling patterns drooped with exhaustion, while Kale's jagged, indigo designs pulsed with clinical intensity. Elias still struggled to trust them. Silvara's secretive alliance with Kale, Kale's history of betrayal. But they were Lirien's only hope. The corridor was silent save for the soft hum of the station's systems, a stark contrast to the chaos of Cryon 9's plasma storms or Alara Haven's bustling markets. Elias's mind drifted to those moments. Lirien's fierce grace in battle, her glowing patterns in the tent, the shock of her pregnancy. Each had reshaped his world, pulling him from a soldier's rigid path to something deeper, something worth risking everything for. But now, with Lirien's life and their child's hanging in the balance, doubt gnawed at him. Had he made the right choice, bringing her here? The lab door hissed open, and Silvara emerged, her lavender skin pale under the harsh lights. Her pattern sagged, but a tired smile broke through as she met Elias's gaze. "They're stable," she said, her voice soft but firm. "The nanites harmonized the conflicting DNA. Your child's cellular structure is secure." Relief crashed over Elias like a wave, his knees nearly buckling. "And Lirien?" he asked, his voice rough. "Resting," Silvara said. "The procedure was taxing, but her vitals are strong. She's asking for you." Elias nodded, his throat tight, and followed her inside. The lab was a maze of humming consoles and glowing chambers, some containing experimental embryos, testaments to Silvara's interspecies research. Lirien lay on the platform, her raven braids spilling across the cushion, her crystalline patterns pulsing with renewed vigor. Her violet eyes, bright despite her fatigue, found his as he approached. He took her hand, her skin warm and humming with faint energy. "We did it," Lirien whispered, squeezing his fingers. "Our child will live." Elias pressed his forehead to hers, a Voryn gesture of affection that had become second nature. "Both of you will," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Her patterns glowed brighter at his touch, a silent promise between them. Kale cleared his throat from across the room, his indigo patterns flickering with unease. "The nanites will continue monitoring for another 48 hours, he said, his tone clinical but laced with relief. "The pregnancy should progress normally, approximately 3 weeks to term, given the accelerated development." Silvara stepped forward, her patterns regaining some of their spiral elegance. "I've transmitted the procedure data to progressive factions within both our governments, those advocating for human-Voryn cooperation." Elias's eyes narrowed. "What factions?" "Visionaries," Silvara said, her voice steady. "People in the Voryn Science Enclave and Earth's diplomatic corps who believe our species can unite. Your child is proof of that compatibility, a living bridge between our peoples." Lirien's patterns pulse skeptically. "And why should we trust them?" "The Enclave forced me into hiding." "Because they're not the Enclave's old guard," Silvara replied. "These are reformers, and they're not alone. But there's a problem. Helix Dynamics and Enclave agents have tracked you to this quadrant. They'll be here within days." Elias's hand instinctively moved to his blaster. "Then we leave now? Get to the outer rim, disappear again?" "No," Silvara said, her patterns flaring with urgency. "Running won't work anymore. My contacts have arranged a meeting at Equinox Concord, a neutral platform between human and Voryn territories. Representatives from both sides are offering protection, not persecution." "Why would they do that?" Lirien asked, her scientific mind dissecting the offer. "What's their motive?" Silvara's expression softened. "Your child represents what generations of diplomats couldn't achieve, a tangible bond between our species. They see a future in cooperation, not conflict." Elias exchanged a glance with Lirien, her patterns pulsing nervously. The idea of facing their governments, after months of exile, felt like walking into a trap. But the alternative, endless running, their child born in hiding, was no life at all. "We'll hear them out," he said finally. "But we're not handing over our kid to anyone." 3 days later, their shuttle glided toward Equinox Concord, a gleaming structure suspended in the void, its silver spires catching the light of distant stars. The platform was a marvel of engineering, its curved hulls designed to symbolize balance between species. Lirien sat in the co-pilot's seat, her hand resting on her rounded abdomen, her crystalline patterns flickering with unease. The pregnancy had intensified her glow, making her a beacon even in the shuttle's dim cockpit. "Are we doing the right thing?" she asked quietly, her violet eyes searching Elias's face. He covered her hand with his, feeling the faint hum of her energy. "I'm tired of running, Lirien. I want our child to have a home, not a hiding place." She nodded, her patterns settling into a steady pulse. "Voryn don't have homes the way humans do. We're nomadic, tied to energy flows. But I want that for her, a place to belong." The summit was a spectacle unlike anything Elias had seen. Human and Voryn diplomats stood side by side in the central chamber, their uniforms and crystalline designs a tapestry of unity. Holographic star maps floated above, marking shared territories. Admiral Nora Cade, Elias's former commander, approached, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp but warm. "Commander Holt," she said, extending a hand. "Your departure's been reclassified as a special diplomatic assignment, retroactively." "Convenient," Elias said dryly, shaking her hand. Does that come with a pardon? Cade's lips twitched. It comes with a future, if you want it. The Voryn representative, a tall female with flowing patterns, addressed Lirien with formal respect. Specialist Veyra, the Enclave extends its apologies for policies that drove you into exile. Your bioenergy research is credited to you, with full recognition. Your child will be honored as a symbol of unity, not studied as a specimen. Lirien's patterns pulsed with surprise, but her voice remained guarded. And if we refuse to be symbols? The representative's patterns softened. You'll have the freedom to choose your path. Later, on a quiet observation deck overlooking a sea of stars, Elias pulled Lirien close, her warmth grounding him. The deck's transparent dome revealed the galaxy's vastness, a reminder of how far they'd come. Not how I imagined meeting my superiors, he said, his tone light. Nor I mine, Lirien replied, leaning against him. Her patterns glowed contentedly where their bodies touched. Humans adapt quickly. Your admiral saw the political gain in our story. Pragmatic Elias agreed. And hopeful, he reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small ring crafted from an iridescent alloy, its surface shimmering like Lirien's patterns. There's an Earth tradition, marriage. It's a promise to face the future together, no matter what. Lirien's patterns pulsed rapidly, betraying her emotion. What does it entail exactly? A vow, he said, his voice steady despite a sudden nervousness. To raise our child, navigate this mess of politics, figure out whose holidays to celebrate. Logical, she said, her patterns flaring as she pulled him into a kiss, her energy humming against his skin. The deck glowed with her light, a beacon in the dark. I believe yes is the human response. Elias slipped the ring on her finger, its glow blending with her patterns. For the first time in months, the future felt like a promise, not a threat. What a moment. Support the channel by liking this video and subscribing for more epic tales. The ceremonial hall of Equinox Concord was a blend of human and Voryn aesthetics, its arched ceiling studded with holographic stars that mirrored the galaxy outside. 2 weeks after the summit, Commander Elias Holt and Specialist Lirien Veyra stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by representatives from both their worlds. The air buzzed with anticipation, the scent of Voryn energy crystals mingling with the crisp formality of human incense. Elias wore a tailored GDC dress uniform, its silver trim catching the light, while Lirien stood radiant in a flowing Voryn garment, its fabric woven with crystalline threads that amplified her glowing patterns. The ceremony was a fusion of traditions, a testament to the bond they'd forged. A human officiant spoke of love and commitment, her words punctuated by the soft chime of Voryn energy crystals, which pulsed in time with Lirien's patterns. A Voryn elder performed an energy-sharing ritual, guiding Elias and Lirien to press their palms together, their combined glow illuminating the hall. Lirien's violet eyes sparkled with a mix of scientific curiosity and unguarded joy, while Elias felt a warmth that transcended species, a certainty that this was where he belonged. As they exchanged vows, Elias's voice was steady, though his heart raced. I promise to stand by you, to protect our family, to face every challenge together. Lirien's patterns flared, her voice melodic yet firm. I vow to share my energy, my knowledge, and my future with you, across all worlds. The crowd, human diplomats in crisp uniforms, Voryn scientists with swirling patterns, erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the hall. The ceremony marked more than their union. It was a symbol of hope, a step toward a galaxy where humans and Voryn could coexist. Elias felt the weight of that responsibility, but with Lirien's hand in his, it was a weight he was ready to carry. A week later, in a specialized medical facility on Equinox Concord, their daughter was born. The delivery room was a marvel of interspecies technology, its walls lined with Voryn energy crystals that hummed in harmony with Lirien's patterns. Elias stood by her side, his hand gripping hers as she endured the final stages of labor. Her amethyst skin glowed with exertion, her crystalline patterns flaring in waves that synced with each contraction. The medical team, a mix of human and Voryn specialists, worked with quiet efficiency, their scanners tracking the baby's unique bioenergy signature. When the first cry pierced the air, Elias's breath caught. The lead medic, a Voryn with gentle patterns, lifted the newborn, her tiny body a perfect blend of her parents. She had Elias's deep blue eyes, Lirien's silver hair, and skin that shimmered between human tones and a faint amethyst hue. As the medic placed her in Elias's arms, tiny crystalline patterns flickered to life across her skin, responding to his touch with a soft, radiant glow. "She's beautiful," Elias whispered, his voice thick with awe. He turned to Lirien, who lay on the delivery bed, her patterns pulsing with a warm, contented light. Her violet eyes were bright with tears, a rare display of emotion for the scientist he'd come to love. "Her energy is strong," Lirien said, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek. The infant's patterns flared brighter, syncing with her mother's in a mesmerizing dance. "She's ours." They named her Aurora, a name that evoked the dawn of a new era, a star born from their unlikely union. Elias cradled her, marveling at the way her patterns shifted, a delicate interplay of human and Voryn heritage. The medical team stepped back, giving them space, their own patterns glowing with quiet respect. As Elias brought Aurora to Lirien's arms, she looked up at him, her patterns still shimmering with the afterglow of childbirth. "What are you thinking?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. He smiled, settling beside her on the bed. "I'm thinking that the most important missions start with the simplest requests, like disassembling a neural harness so you could stabilize back on Cryonine." Lirien's eyes sparkled with understanding, her patterns pulsing in a rhythm he now recognized as love. "Exactly like that," she said, her voice warm. That moment changed everything. Their journey had begun in a storm, on a forgotten desert planet, with a plea for help that neither could have predicted would lead here. The battle against the Shadow Veil Consortium, the flight to Alara Haven, the desperate gamble at Silvara's station, all had forged a path to this moment, to Aurora's first breath. Their love, born in chaos, had bridged not just their hearts but their peoples, sparking a new understanding in a galaxy long divided. Aurora stirred in Lirien's arms, her tiny patterns glowing brighter as she nestled closer. The room's crystals hummed softly, their light blending with the family's radiance. Outside, Equinox Concord's spires gleamed against the starry void, a beacon of unity in a changing galaxy. Elias pressed a kiss to Lirien's forehead, his hand resting on Aurora's silver hair. "We're just getting started," he said, his voice a mix of determination and hope. Lirien's patterns flared, her smile radiant. Together, she agreed, her energy humming against his skin. As they held their daughter, the future stretched before them. Uncharted, challenging, but bright with possibility. Aurora's patterns glowed, a new star in a galaxy remade by love, courage, and the spark of unity that had begun with a simple act of trust.